inflation factor, or plus or minus depending on inflation. I'm not sure that it's worth stalling this whole contract at this stage in order to include that particular piece. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the council member from the 1st District.
Thank you, Mr. Honor. Mr. Honor, Your Honor. Excuse me for that. I think in fairness to the proposal before us in the amendment, I think we should really hear from the representative from Quick Trip, and I'd like to make a motion for a public hearing on that. I know we really don't do that very often at council night, but I think in fairness we should have a public hearing and hear from Mr. Ring and see what his thoughts are, whether that would be acceptable. So I'd like a public hearing.
We got a motion on the floor to suspend the rules and provide for a public hearing. Chair recognizes the council member from the 10th District.
Yeah, you know, it's unnecessary, and all due respect, Mr. Ring. First of all, this is not a substantive change. It's taking them at their word that they want to buy the building. That's all it's doing, in effect, okay? And Mrs. Cotter, you have to let us do our job. We got this on Tuesday night. Mr. Schwantz himself said on Tuesday night, we frequently reverse ourselves on Thursday nights once we've had a chance to think about it. We're just trying to do our job. I've read the whole thing. Makes very poor reading. And this is the only point where I felt that you have a real weak spot. There's no reason for them to buy the building the way it's drafted. If they really want to buy the building, then this is no change whatsoever. None. If they're looking for a freebie, then this is a huge change. I don't think it's necessary for a public hearing, and you got to have 12 votes to have one.
All right, motion on the floor is to suspend the rules to provide for a public hearing. To hear from a representative from Quick Trip. Again, this does require a 2/3 vote. It's a pleasure to the council. If there's no further discussion, please cast your votes. The motion is carried. Mr. Ring, would you like to speak on this item?
Sure, I'll make it. Good evening. Thanks for your opportunity to speak. To Mr. Farmer's comment, Councilmember Farmer's, he's right. We have a strong interest to acquire the property. There's no question about it. Once we can resolve the remediation environmental problems to the satisfaction of the city and a Quick Trip, we certainly want to expedite and move forward to acquire the property. It has strategic interest to us based on the proximity to our existing facility. Certainly will provide us with the opportunity to create the type of freezer storage space that we badly need. For instance, right now we actually have trailers where we store the product rather than an immediate adjacent freezer facility. So from an efficiency capacity standpoint, it will certainly be a useful property that we do have a strong interest in acquiring. As was pointed out, we certainly will negotiate in good faith and wanting to have a triple net lease to be fair to the taxpayers. I guess it's certainly up to the pleasure of the council in terms of the CPI increase. I guess if they do proceed forward with it, I think it would be reasonable to have some kind of a cap on there, barring any inflationary environment that happened in the 1980s where you had inflation going to 15%, just to be reasonable. I mean, I don't know what the cap would be, but I would think that would be certainly something that would be reasonable to be included in such an amendment going forward.
All right, is there any further discussion or any other questions for the speaker, Mr. Councilmember Farmer?
I don't object to a cap 10%.
Yeah,
We all pray we don't get there, but you know.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
But
normal.
I understand the concept of a cap.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm just looking at like a normal commercial lease. What would be reasonable, to put in there?
When you get out of public hearing, I'll move for 10%, a cap of 10.
There's no other discussion. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Motion on the floor is to close the public hearing. If there is no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. The chair recognizes council member from the 10th district.
If you'll allow, if it's agreeable to the second, who I think was Mrs. Richmond, my amendment that would now include that no annual increase would exceed 10%. Is that agreed? And then you don't have to vote on it since we both agree.
Okay, Mr. Councilman Farmer, if you could clarify, there are two paragraphs in this agreement pertaining to rent, paragraphs 3 and 6. Paragraph 6, there's a clause along the majority.
I'm on 3, only on 3.
3 only.
Yeah.
All right, motion on the floor is to amend, to provide for, again, an annual inflationary 20-year rent be adjusted annually for inflation and thereafter. Is there discussion on the amendment? Cap of 10%. Please explain that, the 20-year re-up figure.
It's presently drafted, they get to re-up successive leases for an additional 20 years, 2 10-year periods, at the rate we're going to give them tonight, and that's not appropriate. It should be whatever the inflation is carried it to at the 20th year.
Okay. So again, inflation will be adjusted after calculations of the initial 20-year period. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If there is none, please cast your votes on the amendment. Motion is carried. All right, is there further discussion on the main motion on the floor? Item 45. Chair recognizes council member from the 10th district.
Now, I admit, I'm not pulling a Sweeney, so I'm now committed to vote for this, but you raised an interesting point the other night about where we draw the line, and I asked Mr. Delagrave this afternoon if he would be able to, this has a 10% figure where we give them 10% of the increased taxes, if that's phrasing it correctly. And so I asked him if he would quickly, if it wouldn't be too much burden, look and see what we did on some of the other TIFs where it was a grant back, what percentage we used. And I asked for that simply because if the trend lines up, that's bad. I mean, if the first one was 3, the next one's 5, this one's 10, that's a bad trend line. If the trend line's stable, that's good. It'd even be better if the trend line's down, but that'd probably be a lot to hope for. But I think we should have that information before we vote.
Mr. Finance Director, would you like to speak on this item?
Sure. In response to Councilmember Farmer's request, went back and looked at with the city attorney's assistants later this afternoon. We went back and looked at the previous developers agreements that have TID reverse incentives involved in them. We were able to, excluding this particular agreement, we found 10 that had some type of reverse TID provision. Just keep in mind, I'll qualify these statements or these percentages that we're going to talk about, that each and every one of these developers agreements came as a package. There are different items, job requirements, perhaps maybe assessed value guarantees, incentive splits. So those things are different in each one of these agreements, and that may cause or be reason for some of the differences in these particular agreements. But the first one that actually had contained the first reverse TID incentive was the first Gunderson Lutheran agreement, and that had a 59% incentive payment in it.
59?
59.
Well, the trend line's in the right direction.
Well, if you looked at the last one, then that'd be down to 8.5. But the second one was the Riverside Center 2 agreement. That had a 22% incentive in it. Then there was a Custom Metals. I probably should tell you what district these are in, just so that you know. Custom Metals is in 9, Riverside Center is in 11, and Gunderson Lutheran's in 14. But Custom Metals in TID 9 had a 10% incentive clause. GGP, which is inland printing in TID 4, had a 20% incentive. Northside Development, which was the Candlewood Suites development in TID 12, had a 2.4% incentive. Fowler and Hammer, which was in TID 7,